we're live from MILAM TV, and I have one of my favorite guests, Andy Davis. Andy?
Hey, Kimberly.
Andy's with the Barnes Global Advisors, as if you don't already know who Andy is. Andy, I want to talk to you today in your role as in government engagement, the work that you do at the Barnes Global Advisors, and certainly with us. I remember we met one of the first MILAM events. I want to say 2017, maybe 2016. It was something like that. And I remember you were still inside the government at the time, and let's just say we've kept the song and dance up. You guys,
it's been fun.
It has been. It continues to be fun.
This has grown massively too. This event from that first couple that were in the law firm with like 100 people.
Yes.
And now like we're at the convention center.
1,200 or something like that.
Yeah, over 1,000 for sure, and taking up the Tampa Convention Center.
It's all good, and yet I think most of the issues that we had before are still here. So I suppose that's good. It's sort of the Full Employment Act for Andy and Kimberly. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind just giving me a little brief intro to some of the things you're focused on right now.
Yeah, I think the fact that we're still here having these conversations is exciting.
Yeah,
it's always fun to have them. But I think too that there's a lot of work that's been done.
Yeah,
massive progress made. You walk around the exhibit hall here and you see the companies that are exhibiting. We hear the people that are talking on stage with the military, how they're employing additive and advanced manufacturing. But there's so much more to be done. We at the Barnes Global Advisors have been spending a lot of time with the Maritime Industrial Base recently. Other services as well. We're doing some cool stuff for the Army on looking at qualification pathways for things like helicopter transmission housings, and we're doing stuff with the Air Force and through you guys with the Air Force.
Yes.
But on the MIB side, the Maritime Industrial Base has been the champion for the industry right now, and it's really
it's really held a core set of discussion items that we could all coalesce around and really and it's helped really advance the whole enterprise.
I think the best thing that's happened to additive in the last 10 years is that the Navy said we're going to use additive to figure out our construction and sustainment problems for submarines. And they're not there yet. There's a lot of work to be done, but there's a steady strategy, there's a plan, there's funding, there's a massive amount of the people here at the event even are a part of that in various ways, and really trying to drive forward with that as a solution. And we're excited to be a part of that.
You're one of the first calls I always make when I need to understand certain policy angles, and you've lived overseas and have, really thought deeply about these government challenges and how to advance the ball. And I'll say, when I started America Makes a few years ago, America Makes was not talking about supply chains. It was talking about R&D, technology, education and workforce and training and all that, which is all like obviously super important still. But we've seen a shift in the last few years toward, okay, what is the technology making? What platforms, products, what are we doing with it? That has really come into focus, especially this year and last year and this year. And so we sit here today with the same commitment, but a different angle on it. And, for me, I'm starting to focus on that. I'm starting to untangle some of that stuff. And last night I had the pleasure to sit down with some of the UK folks, and we told some fun jokes. But, they're having some of the same issues we are. And I just got to talk to Jeppe Foshamar from
Denmark,
and they're having the same issues too. So we are not alone in this fight.
It's universal.
It absolutely is. And so even in that, we're still talking about how we want to take our supply chains and bring them back to the United States. Is that really something that can be done, or is that a false dream, or where do you come down on that? Because you always have a unique angle.
Yeah, thanks. I think that the conversation around supply chain is necessary, because the conversation around parts is really where we want to get to, right? And you've got to deliver parts. Additive doesn't stand alone. I've thought a bit about this concept of like additive enabled over the last little bit, and if that's like what we should be saying instead of additive parts, they're additive enabled parts, because it's one step in the value chain. And I think that America Makes and others have done a nice job over the last, even the conferences have done a nice job over the last, 4 or 5 years of trying to shift that narrative away from it's about the printers to it's not about the printers. It's about the part. It's about the problem you're solving, and the printers is one piece of that.
And the authority now, the decisional authorities and
Yeah, sure.
and
That's all piece of it. Qualification,
the people stuff.
everything from requirements to engineering to qualification to materials to technology to supply chain to, you're printing the part. Then what do you do with it after you're printing a shape, really? And then what do you do with it after that to make it into a part? That whole value chain is super critical. So as we think about then, where does the concept of supply chain, where does the concept of reshoring or bringing things back to the U.S. fit into that? It's really complex. Today, our existence is a global supply chain. Very few things are fully made with raw materials that are pulled out of the ground in the U.S. all the way through final part, right? It's a global supply chain, because even if we pull the raw materials out of the ground, we send them somewhere else to be processed, and then eventually maybe they get integrated back into a final product here. The complexity, I think, comes in terms of what should be brought back to the U.S. So if there's something that was here and it left, what should we bring back? Should we bring everything back or not? I think there's a big discussion there to be had. At what point in that value chain from raw material to final part are we talking about bringing stuff back? There's policies that have to change if we're going to start processing rare earth materials at scale in this country. There's environmental policies, there's health and safety policies, there's these kinds of things. There's a global marketplace that's been stood up for some of these things that we just don't compete in right now. And so there's a question around viability of the market to support having it in the US. We have relationships with countries around the world and companies in countries around the world. Our industrial base spans this global supply chain. If we're all of a sudden going to stop using a capability or a supplier that's in another country, whether it's a friendly country or not, or an adversarial country or not, depending on how you want to look at that, we better darn well have the capability here in the U.S. to backfill and do that. And as we know from going through the additive process, is like qualifying a facility, qualifying a process, certifying that the parts come out of that are good. It takes time, it takes resources, it takes all these things. And so it doesn't happen overnight. And so that's where I've been spending time thinking around, like, man, what does this actually mean? And how do we do it in a way that gets us to the point of national security, economic prosperity, being able to make the things we need when we need them from a military standpoint, completely within the control that we think we say we need?
It is an interesting, it's almost like a red herring, because these supply chains, we have grown up during the era of globalization and of the supply chains and everything. Like, I think what was the one piece of fruit travels 1,500 miles to get to you. A T-shirt, even more. Yeah. So like, we have global supply chains, and certainly overnight, it's taken decades to get them there. And we've had 80 years of relative peace and calm, and 80 years of seeing each other as friends, friendversaries, but friends mostly, and a lot of business has gone back and forth. So I don't know how we get to that point, certainly not quickly, but even the mindset shift, like, I just have a hard time seeing others as unfriendlies.
Yeah, I think that...
I don't think we have to.
I don't know that we have to label... I don't know that we have to label friendly versus unfriendly.
No,
I think that's maybe that's the red herring bit, right? I think there's definitely competition in the world, and I don't want to be naive to that and say that there's not, but I think that... Or
unfair practices that...
Sure.
But I think one example of that, if I could add, is that we've got this whole patent and IP framework that works in the West and doesn't even function in other places. And we're holding ourselves to a standard, and some of our friends to a standard, that, I don't know, in the age of digitization and perhaps even AI, it's really not relevant anymore. And that old system is fading, but we haven't replaced it. And it's actually harmful in some cases.
I think businesses have to make money, right? If we think about it from that standpoint, any company that exists out there, even companies that are nonprofit, they still have to pay their bills, right? They still have to feed their people and take care of that. And so as we look at this idea of, bringing things back or establishing capability or fixing the patent system so it works globally, if there's not a business case to be made for it, it's just not going to happen unless there's a place for the government. I shouldn't say unless there's a place for the government in this to come in and help augment some of that. And so, what does that look like? What does that offset funding look like to help, manage some of this, whether it's helping stand up additive capability ahead of the actual demand, the actual POs coming in. Like, let's get the industry ready to go. There's a place for the government perhaps in there to help seed that and get it going. Let's address policy issues that prevent companies from engaging in the defense industrial base.
Yes, there's a lot of them.
Let's think about partnerships overseas and what does it look like to have meaningful trade agreements or partnerships with companies across the supply chain across the globe, where we have friendships. We'll call them allies, right?
Yeah.
I had a general one time tell me that we don't have friends, we have allies. Okay, great, sure, whatever.
Mutual self-interest.
Yeah, right. And
that's
so
the difference, maybe.
So I think that's the piece that you through the America Makes Policy Working Group that you've stood up, and the work that we do together to advocate across the government. Like, that's a massive opportunity space for us to help educate the people on the federal side, like what they could be doing, whether it's programs and funding that comes into the industrial base, or it's policy conversations we have on the Hill or with organizations in the federal government. There's an education process that needs to happen in there, and
there really is.
I think we have lots of opportunity to go do good things there.
We do, and I do believe this community, the additive community of practice, and you taught me that term, by the way, years ago. The additive community of practice has been a very collegial community. It really is a community. We know each other. We talk about a lot of things. I'm not saying there isn't competition, but we really have been shouldering this technology together to advance it. Even the very large competitive prime defense contractors and other mid-sized companies that serve them, I mean, we've all been in it together. So, and that's across countries. It's not just in the United States. So I don't want to necessarily tee up this, it has to be negative or competitive. I'm not sure what the full answer is, but I think I know where I'd like it to go.
I think there's a lot of goodness in what we're seeing coming out of the government. There's chaos, of course. It feels like it's always chaos, no matter who's there. But there's lots of opportunity, and the language that you see in the documents that are coming out is still super encouraging for me as I look back over the last 15 or so years of my paying attention to these kinds of things. The fact that we have a national defense strategy, which just came out last week, which one of its 3 pillars is build the defense industrial base. And so there's still loads of opportunity there. I get excited about that. I'm optimistic in that way. I have questions when about how that gets executed and how we as a community, the community of practice, can inform and influence what's actually happening there. I see big movements happening in massive announcements that companies are making across our nation that are U.S.-based companies that are getting large sums of, whether it's private funding coming in or public funding coming in, to grow and go use additive as a solution set for some of these big hairy problems. And so I think we've had a lot of success. And so I don't want to be like, this is a negative space at all. I think there's a lot of questions that have to be answered, and I think that's where we're working hard on the TBGA side, is to try to help answer that. And so whether it's through thinking about ecosystems, which I know is near and dear to your heart, and what does it look like to truly do this is workforce, it's supply chain, it's infrastructure, it's technology, it's digital, it's policy, it's all these things. The military has their .mil-PF, acronym for all the things that have to be true, from doctrine to material to training to the way stuff is employed. I think we should be looking at advanced manufacturing in the same way as what's the training that has to happen? What's the doctrine in terms of how it's going to be used? What's the facilities and the equipment and supply chain need to look like? And what's the material solution look like? And that rolls into your qualification pathways. And you mentioned the Brits,
absolutely.
A bunch of good friends of mine are over there still from we live there. And I just saw a few in the hallway here. And, how do you do common qualification across our collective space? And so it's not just about a supply chain, but now how do we attack the same big, hairy problems together because we all have the same general end state in mind as allies? And so using our friends in England, using our friends in Australia under this AUKUS agreement maybe is a great way to really get after that alone. And as we do that, like getting qualification pathways in line that now don't just think about the U.S., but think about some of our partner nations, that's the way to lead. I'm excited for that.
I agree with everything that you said, Andy. I want to not agree with you just so I can
Let's go.
Make you mad, but
Let's fight.
I wish I could.
We can't.
I can't really.
We're too smart for that.
I know. I'm violent agreement with you. So what I am going to ask you, though, is as you think about where you want to be, let's say we have this conversation again next year. Not this conversation, but a new conversation. What do you believe we will either A, be working on next year that we aren't working on today? If you can even see in that crystal ball. So it's more of a crystal ball conversation. I'm gonna ask that question instead of, yeah, that's what I'm gonna ask you. What's the crystal ball?
What's the crystal ball?
What's the crystal ball?
I'm really excited for this AUKUS thing. I think that we are going to move forward nicely with a combined, we'll call it a tri-national view on how to employ additive. And I hope that we're talking about ways that we've learned from our partner nations on how to go faster, ways to accept risk. You know, we heard a panel earlier today on Ukraine and what's happening in Ukraine. And over again, we heard they don't care about qualification. They don't care about intellectual property. They're in the middle of fighting a war. They're in the middle of fighting for their lives, for their homeland, for their families. And so I think that as we try to learn lessons from that and employ those, as we take advantage of what the British are doing to go faster with a smaller, more nimble enterprise than we have, and as we have goodness that we can share into that, and as we work towards helping build out a strategy or seeing a strategy get built out for Australia, that those things come together in a really exciting way, and that we see a lot of progress there.
Well, I like the half fullness that you're laying down here, and I'll play. I think that's all moving forth in a good way. We're also working with the Koreans and trying to understand what the Japanese are doing at the moment also. So I think we're starting to see that Indo-Pacific region really enliven to embrace its own future with its own set of technologies and production. But I think all of us benefit from each of us taking a certain set of responsibility for our own protection, our own supply chains. And I think that we're going to find the opportunity inside of that as each of us pursue our goals. So I'm optimistic, Andy, and I hope to be sitting here in a year talking to you about how we've done it.
I'm excited. Let's go.
Let's do it. All right. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, as always.
See you later.